For 54 years, it was a staple on the PGA Tour calendar, a tournament that felt like home for the Midwest, a sponsor that never flinched, even when the big money rolled in elsewhere. But this week, that all came crashing down. John Deere is out, just like that. No warning, no graceful farewell. Just a quiet exit that has left the entire golf world wondering what actually happened behind closed doors. This isn't just about a company walking away. This is about the last man standing. Chris Gotterup walked into TPC Deere Run with the weight of history on his shoulders, and he left as the final champion. But here is the part that makes this story hurt. His win wasn't just a victory, it was the closing ceremony for something the tour might never get back. You've seen sponsors leave before, but 54 years? That is not a breakup. That is a divorce that shakes the foundation, and the timing could not be worse. The signature events are eating the schedule alive, the regular tour stops are bleeding relevance, and if a brand like John Deere can pull the plug after half a century, what does that say about the future of every other non-signature event? Here is the reality. This story is bigger than one company or one player. This is about the soul of the PGA Tour getting squeezed out by dollar signs, and Chris Gotterup's name is now permanently attached to that tragedy. So, here is my honest take. The tour messed this up. They let a loyal partner walk away, and they didn't even fight to keep them. Do you agree? Or do you think John Deere made the right call? Drop your take in the comments, and while you are at it, hit that subscribe button, because we are about to break down the exact moment everything fell apart, and trust me, you are not going to like what we found. But we will get to him in a moment, because before we talk about the winner, we need to understand exactly what he was walking into. When I say everything fell apart, I do not mean it happened overnight. The cracks started forming years ago. It was a slow bleed, a quiet erosion that nobody in charge wanted to admit was happening. But the numbers never lie, and the schedule never lies either. The John Deere Classic used to sit in a sweet spot on the calendar. Midsummer, warm weather, a comfortable stop before the British Open grind. But then the signature events started multiplying. The purses exploded. The top 50 players in the world suddenly had mandatory commitments to these mega money weeks, and everything else became optional. For the big names, this tournament turned into a rest week, and when Scottie Scheffler, Jordan Spieth, and Brooks Koepka stopped showing up, the television ratings follow them right out the door. To put it bluntly, John Deere was paying top dollar for a second-tier field. They were writing checks north of $15 million annually, and in return, they were getting a leaderboard filled with rookies and tour journeymen. That is not a sustainable business model. That is a charity. And corporate boards do not like charities that cost them millions without a return. Take a step back and look at the calendar. This event was squeezed between the Travelers Championship and the Rocket Mortgage Classic, two tournaments with bigger marketing budgets and flashier venues. When players look at that stretch, they start doing math. Rest, recovery, and preparation for the majors always win over obligation. So the roster thinned out. The galleries felt emptier. The energy dropped. But that is only half the story. The real dagger came from inside the PGA Tour's own rulebook. The sponsorship agreement had clauses tied to player participation, minimum field strength requirements. If the tournament could not guarantee a certain number of top 20 players, the sponsor had the right to renegotiate. And when those numbers fell short year after year, the renegotiation leaned heavily in one direction. John Deere started asking for discounts. The tour pushed back, and the trust between both sides just evaporated. That tension built for 3 straight seasons. Quiet meetings, strained phone calls, lawyers getting involved, until finally, someone at the top of the agricultural giant made the only decision that made financial sense: walk away. Here is the part that should terrify every golf fan. If a company with 54 years of loyalty can walk away without a fight, what stops the others from doing the same? The Memorial is safe because of Jack Nicklaus. The Players is untouchable because of the purse. But these middle-tier events, they are sitting ducks. Behind all this corporate noise, a kid named Chris Gotterup was watching from the shadows. He saw the chaos. He heard the rumors. And he knew that if this was going to be the last dance, he had to be the one leading it. That question hung in the air for months. Why was he even allowed to step onto that stage in the first place? The answer takes us back 3 years, to a moment nobody remembers, except Gotterup himself. Rewind to 2022. Chris Gotterup was nobody. Not a rookie, not a star, just a college kid who had just turned professional and had zero status on any major tour. He had no sponsors, no guaranteed starts, no safety net. He was grinding on mini tours, sleeping in cheap motels, wondering if he had made the biggest mistake of his life. Most players in his position would have given up. They would have taken a desk job or become a teaching pro somewhere. But Gotterup did something desperate. He sat down at a cheap desk in his rental room and wrote a letter. Not an email, not a text. A physical, handwritten letter. And he addressed it to the tournament directors of the John Deere Classic. In that letter, he begged. He told them he had game. He told them he just needed a chance, one chance, a sponsor's exemption to play in their event. He had no right to ask. He had no resume to back it up, but he asked anyway, because he had nothing to lose. The tournament staff could have thrown that letter in the trash. They get hundreds of those requests every year, but someone on that committee read it, and something about the desperation, the honesty, the raw hunger struck a chord. They gave him the spot, a sponsor's exemption, a free pass into a PGA Tour event that he had no business being in. That week, Gotterup walked onto TPC Deere Run with zero expectations. He was just happy to be there, happy to share a locker room with actual tour pros, happy to see his name on a leaderboard, even if it was near the bottom. But then something strange happened. He started playing out of his mind. He made the cut. Then he kept climbing. By Sunday evening, he had finished fourth in a PGA Tour event. The check he earned that week was more money than he had made in his entire life combined. More than that, he earned points. FedEx Cup points that gave him partial status. That 1 week changed everything. Without that letter, without that exemption, without the kindness of a tournament that took a chance on a nobody, Chris Gotterup would have disappeared into obscurity. He would have been just another guy who never made it. That 2022 finish was supposed to be the highlight of his career. Nobody predicted that 4 years later, he would be the one holding the final trophy while the sponsor that saved him walked out the door. Fast forward to 2026. The atmosphere at TPC Deere Run was different. It was heavy. The rumors had been swirling for months. Insiders knew the contract was dead. The players knew, the caddies knew, even the volunteers who had worked the event for decades knew this was the end. But nobody said it out loud. It was the elephant on the fairway. Gotterup showed up that week not as a nobody, but as a hungry contender. He had won twice earlier in the season. His game was sharp, his confidence was real. But this week was not about the money. It was not about the rankings. It was about respect. This tournament had given him his life, and now he was going to give it everything he had in return. The field was weak. Let us be honest about that. Most of the top names had already committed to the next signature event. They had no interest in a mid-tier tournament with a shrinking purse and a dying sponsor. But for a guy like Gotterup, that did not matter. He was not playing the field. He was playing the course, and he was playing for something far bigger than a trophy. Saturday night, he was 3 shots off the lead. The gallery was smaller than previous years, but the fans who showed up were loud. They were loyal. They knew this was the last ride, and they wanted to witness history. Gotterup felt that energy. It fueled him. Then Sunday came, and everything changed. But before we talk about those final 18 holes, you need to understand the one clause in the contract that made this breakup unavoidable. Because without that detail, none of this makes sense. Here it is. The bombshell that nobody in the media has talked about enough. The sponsorship agreement between John Deere and the PGA Tour contained a performance escalator clause. It meant that if the tournament's average field strength dropped below a certain threshold for 3 consecutive years, John Deere had the legal right to terminate the contract with only 90 days' notice. No negotiation, no appeal, just a clean exit. The tour knew this. The players knew this. And yet, the schedule kept getting more crowded. More signature events were added. The top 50 players kept skipping. And by the end of 2025, the numbers triggered that clause. John Deere did not quit out of spite. They quit because the contract allowed them to. They quit because the tour failed to protect the field. They quit because the tour chose the signature events over the traditional stops. Now think about that for a second. The PGA Tour had 54 years to protect this relationship. 54 years of loyalty. 54 years of branding. 54 years of community goodwill. And they let it slip away because they refused to make the regular events mandatory. They refused to protect their own history. They sold out the middle class of the tour for a few mega purses that only benefit the top 20 players. That decision by the tour headquarters is the real villain of this story. Not John Deere, not the players, not Chris Gotterup, the executives who prioritize the rich events over the soul of the game. So Sunday morning arrives. Gotterup knows this is the last John Deere Classic. He knows that if he wins, his name will be etched into the final page of a 54-year book. He also knows that the sponsor who gave him his first break is about to disappear forever. The weight of that irony is crushing. He starts the final round 5 shots behind Ben Coles. 5 shots. On any normal day, that gap is insurmountable. But this is not a normal day. The course is soft, the wind is calm, and Gotterup has a look in his eye that nobody else has. He birdies the first hole, then the third, then the fifth. He is not just playing golf. He is on a mission. Every putt seems to find the center of the cup. Every iron shot sticks within 10 feet. The crowd starts to buzz. They sense something special unfolding. By the turn, he has cut the lead to 2 shots. The gallery is packed around the green at the 9th, screaming his name. Gotterup tips his cap. He does not smile. He is locked in. He knows this is his moment. The back 9 is pure chaos. Coles is stumbling. He finds trouble on 12. He finds more trouble on 15. Meanwhile, Gotterup is flawless. He makes birdie on 13, 14, and 16. The lead is gone. It is tied, and the final hole is approaching. 18 at TPC Deer Run is a beast. Water on the left, bunkers on the right, a narrow green that demands precision. Coles steps up first. He pulls his approach. It finds the water. Disaster. Double bogey. The door is wide open. Gotterup steps up. He has an 8-iron from 165 yards. The entire tournament rests on this one swing. He takes a deep breath. He remembers the letter he wrote in 2022. He remembers the people who believed in him. He swings. The ball flies high, lands soft, and stops 15 feet from the hole. 2 putts for the win. He sinks the first. The crowd erupts. He is the champion. He had just shot 62. 9 birdies. No bogeys. The greatest round of his life. And he did it on the final day of the final John Deere Classic. The last champion. The book is closed. He lifted that trophy with tears in his eyes. But the real question was already haunting the locker room. Would anyone even remember this tournament existed in 5 years? That is the fear. That is the dread. Because when sponsors walk away, tournaments do not always find new ones. Some events just vanish. They get erased from the calendar. They become footnotes in history books that nobody reads. And the players who built their careers there, they become orphans. John Deere is gone. 54 years of tradition, reduced to a press release. Chris Gotterup is the final name on the trophy. The last man to kiss that silver cup. The last man to hear the roar of a crowd that knew they were witnessing an ending. But here is the uncomfortable truth. The tour let this happen. They chose the money. They chose the signatures. They chose the shiny new events over the old faithful ones. And now, the bill has come due. If the PGA Tour does not change course, this will not be the last traditional tournament to die. Colonial is already bleeding. The Byron Nelson is losing its luster. The Honda Classic is gone. The dominoes are falling. So, I am going to ask you one more time. Do you agree with me that the tour screwed this up? Do you think they could have saved the John Deere Classic if they had tried harder? Or do you think this was inevitable the moment the signature events were created? Let me know in the comments. And if you have made it this far, you are exactly the kind of fan we want here. Hit that subscribe button, because we are going to keep covering the real stories that the mainstream media ignores. Chris Gotterup will wake up tomorrow as the final champion of a tournament that no longer exists. He will have that title forever. But the rest of us? We just watched the last real tournament die, and I am not sure we even realized it until it was too late. That is the tragedy. That is the story, and that is the warning for everything that comes next.